revolution is really about taking people inside the Islamic world.
This is a true battle about defining the soul and spirits of Islam itself.
The West fundamentally misunderstood and still misunderstands the threat of radical Islam. It is a fanatic, messianic ideology.
Martyrdom means dying for God. And that means going to paradise. That's the Quran.
The Beirut bombings is when we began to suddenly think about terrorism as a national security threat. Suddenly the lexicon in national security included the word terrorism and terrorist.
The government of Iran had said, take a spectacular action against the United States Marines in Lebanon.
We withdrew. Beirut was back in their hands. What did it say to the extremists? It said, we won.
We are at the most dangerous stage of the Iranian Revolution at this moment. Khomeini exported his radical Islamic beliefs.
The West is evilized because he came in and colonized our countries and killed our people, and that helps them to recruit.
Islam had declined, and the correction is supposed to be done by the resurrection of an Islamic empire and the acquisition of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear weapons, if necessary, to obliterate Islam's enemies and to subjugate the rest.
If you go to radical Islam, their choice of words for winning the war that they're engaged in now is to have the United States of America coming to prayer call 5 times a day and praising Allah.
The reformers are those Muslims who say, yes, Islam is the answer, but jihad is not the way. And there are leaders that are rising, Muslims who are pushing back against the radicals.
Are you Jewish? Are you Muslim? Or are you Christian? I don't care about it. Islam comes from peace. Osama bin Laden is not a Muslim for me.
They're enemies of God. I'm going to kill them. And by so doing, I win the sympathy of God. Where in the Quran do you have this?
The big untold story in the Middle East right now is the dramatic and widespread conversions of Muslims to Christianity.
I was a terrorist, but when I was touched with the love of Jesus, suddenly my enemy, the Jew, the Israeli or Israel, is no longer an enemy.
I saw death face to face, but God saved us. Nothing short of phenomenal. Turning to Christ, mostly after 1979.
قم يا دانيال اذهب إلى يسوع المسيح 3 مرات كرر عليه.
Jihad is not the way. Jesus is the way.
The followers of Jihad, Jefferson, and Jesus are battling to dominate the Middle East and change the world.
We'll take you inside the Islamic world as you've never seen it before. In-depth analysis of the 3 critical movements in the Muslim world: the radicals, the reformers, and the revivalists. Who are they? What do they want? And how far are they willing to go to accomplish their objectives? And the big untold story of a dramatic spiritual awakening and religious revival underway in North Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. 3 decades after the Iranian Revolution exploded onto the world stage, the eyes of the nations are looking at the Muslim world and trying to understand its past, its present, and its future. Now, come with us as we go inside the revolution. When you meet those who disbelieve in war, smite them at their necks. Surah 47:4. Just how serious is the threat posed by radical Islam? Porter Goss was an undercover operative for the Central Intelligence Agency. From 2004 to 2006, Goss served as director of the CIA.
It's an extraordinarily serious threat and it is something that we have been very slow to address as a nation. They use suicide bombers in this asymmetric warfare that they have. We don't know how to cope with that. We have to learn to deal new ways to deal with what the radicals do, but we have to begin to understand how they think first, and we haven't even got that first step done. So they're dangerous in themselves, and they're doubly dangerous because we're not prepared right now.
New York Times best-selling author Joel Rosenberg agrees. In his 2009 book, Inside the Revolution, he argues that the biggest threat is Western ignorance, apathy, and a lack of moral clarity.
I believe that radical Islam today poses a clear and present danger to the national security of the United States, to the national security of Europe, Israel, and our allies in the Middle East, in the epicenter, and around the world.
To truly understand the threat, Goss and Rosenberg argue, we must first clearly understand the dynamic underway in the region. There is a crisis of the soul, a profound and widespread feeling that the Islamic world, once the most powerful military, political, and economic force on the planet, is now in a period of sharp and rapid decline.
Islam, for centuries, was the empire on the planet. The Islamic militaries were stronger than Europe, and Islam was creating brilliant scientists and doctors and theorists and philosophers and musicians.
As time goes by, Europe begins to advance scientifically, technologically, and economically.
European universities were developing new ideas, and there was a great openness and freedom of thought and debate and that was not happening in the Islamic world.
Amidst the throes of World War I, the Ottoman Empire, headquartered in Istanbul, Turkey, the heart of the Caliphate, or the Islamic Empire, falls to the combined forces of predominantly Christian countries of Western Europe. Muslims, who have long believed God was with them because they were militarily victorious, are stunned, and this is just the beginning.
The Islamic world was suffering one defeat after another, not just to Europe, but eventually to the new nation of Israel.
May 14, 1948, the Arab powers are stunned by the rise of Israel, and stunned by their inability to defeat the tiny band of poorly armed Jewish immigrants. Then come the Arab-Israeli Wars of 1967 and 1973, two more crushing defeats for the Muslim forces, and despondency begins to spread over the Islamic world.
By the early 1970s, hundreds of millions of Muslims were asking themselves, what went wrong? We were once the greatest civilization on the planet, and now we're failing militarily. We've got tremendous illiteracy. We're not producing Nobel Prize winners. There's not new technologies that are being developed. What's happened with us? What went wrong?
But it is Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf who is the first Islamic leader to speak so publicly of the crisis in the soul of the Muslim world. 52 years ago, we started with a beacon of hope, and today that beacon is no more, and we stand in darkness. There is despondency and hopelessness surrounding us with no light visible anywhere around. The slide down has been gradual, but has rapidly accelerated in the last many years. Today, we have reached a state where our economy has crumbled. Our credibility is lost. In some, we have lost our honor, our dignity, our respect in the community of nations. Is this what our leaders had envisioned? Is this the way to enter the new millennium? Former Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf.
Radicals will tell you, you know what, Islam is the answer and violent jihad is the way. What they mean is the way to regain that glory of the Islamic empire of the previous centuries is to purify, to drive out the West, get rid of infidel Muslims, get rid of Jews and Christians, and purify Islam.
Enter Ruhollah Mossavi Khomeini, better known as the Ayatollah. Disgusted with the pro-American, pro-Israel Shah of Iran, throughout the 1970s, he commits himself and his disciples to convincing the majority of the Iranian people that their only path forward is a jihad, a holy war against the Shah and his infidel regime. February 1st, 1979. The Ayatollah and his inner circle return to Iran from exile in Paris and are welcomed by fervent throngs of supporters chanting, "The Holy One has come." April 1st, 1979, Khomeini declares Iran the world's first Islamic republic. Then comes November 4th, 1979, the day the Ayatollah's student supporters seize the American embassy in Tehran and hold dozens of hostages for 444 humiliating days.
Many of us didn't believe that the Iranians would actually hold the Americans there because they were violating every law, every international law that could be imagined. And we thought surely at some point they will release these people. I mean, this is an outrage. You just simply don't seize embassies and take diplomats hostage. But that was because we didn't understand the mentality of these extremists.
The 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran was one of the defining moments of the 20th century and really has set into motion the geopolitical situation that we face today, a war, a global war with radical Islam.
We did not know the Shah was terminally ill, did not understand who Khomeini was and the support his movement had, did not have a clue as to who the hostage takers were or what their objective was. We were just plain asleep. Former CIA Director Stansfield Turner. Three-star General Jerry Boykin would later command the U.S. Army's elite counter-terrorist unit known as Delta Force.
This nascent Delta Force, which had only been in existence for 2 years, was undergoing its final evaluation to be declared operationally ready. We were notified that the embassy had been seized and that we were to start preparing to go and rescue the Americans.
8 helicopters leave the Nimitz. Only 5 make it to the desert. Some commandos want to proceed, but Colonel Beckwith makes the call to abort. To get all the hostages and commandos out of Iran safely, he argues, they need all the aircraft capacity they can get. 5 choppers simply won't suffice. When it's all over, 8 U.S. servicemen are dead.
It was the greatest professional disappointment of my 36 plus years in the military. In our view, we'd failed our nation.
At 7 o'clock the following morning, President Carter breaks the news to the nation in a live televised address from the Oval Office.
Late yesterday, I canceled a carefully planned operation which was underway in Iran to position our rescue team for a later withdrawal of American hostages who've been held captive there since November 4th. Equipment failure in the rescue helicopters made it necessary to end the mission. As our team was withdrawing after my order to do so, 2 of our American aircraft collided on the ground following a refueling operation in a remote desert location in Iran.
If you stop and think about it, that was one of the 2 most significant propaganda windfalls in radical Islam's history. The jihadists were able to say with some credibility to the rest of the Islamic world, we have just defeated the great Satan. We held their hostages for 444 days and they were inept. Allah has shown us favor. Come to our cause.
It's continuing, and that means we're talking to people today who are being contaminated and polluted, and they will be there tomorrow. They're younger people. They will go up to be tomorrow's leaders of radical jihad unless they're given another choice or a better path to go down.
As dangerous as the Ayatollah Khomeini himself and his immediate band of disciples were, starting in '79 and going forward, what really made them even more dangerous was their commitment to exporting the revolution. They weren't just trying to change Iran. They want to change the world.
October 23, 1983, the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut are attacked by a suicide bomber driving a truck.
When I first heard the news of the attack, I had just come home from church. It was a Sunday morning, and my neighbor met us in the parking lot, tears streaming down her face, sort of grabbed my shoulder as I was getting out of the car. Come in the house, you have to watch the news, something terrible has happened. When the news came on the television, I almost like being physically hit. I kind of sat back in the chair and this can't be happening.
241 Americans die in the coordinated attacks. So do 56 French peacekeepers.
I'd never heard of terrorists. Of course, I'd heard of Muslims, but I'd never heard of this whole idea of radical Muslims and jihad and all that sort of stuff. None of us had ever heard of that.
Almost immediately, Hezbollah, a Shia Muslim terrorist group founded, funded, and trained by Iran, claims credit for the attack. As the U.S. investigation proceeds, it soon becomes clear that the order for the attack has come directly from senior officials in Tehran.
The United States government had intercepted some communications even before the bombing in September of 1983, where the government of Iran had said, take a spectacular action against the United States Marines in Lebanon. And then it went on to say, give some more details, kill them all. You know, it was very morbid and very sinister. It was this kind of, let's just wipe them off, let's just get rid of them, let's just kill them all. But that phrase sticks in my mind, take a spectacular action against the United States Marines.
People that would blow themselves up, this is something we didn't understand. But the great tragedy of that whole thing was the fact that we immediately withdrew our forces. And what did that say? What did it say to the Islamists? What did it say to the extremists? It said, we won, you lost. And with some credibility, they were able to make that claim. They blew up our Marines, we withdrew. Beirut was back in their hands.
The Beirut bombings, at the end of the 70s and the early 80s, is when we began to suddenly think about terrorism as a national security threat. Suddenly the lexicon in national security included the word terrorism and terrorist.
To this propaganda victory for the radicals, others are soon added. 1989, the Soviet military withdraws from Afghanistan, defeated by radical Islamic jihadists. 1993, the U.S. military withdraws from Somalia after gun battles with jihadists. 1993, jihadists bomb the World Trade Center. 1998, 2 U.S. embassies in Africa are bombed by jihadists affiliated with Osama bin Laden. The jihadists' ambitions continue to grow, and the worst is yet to come. Tuesday morning, radical Islamic jihadists working for Osama bin Laden, the wealthy Saudi founder of Al-Qaeda, hijack 4 American commercial jetliners. 2 fly into the Twin Towers in New York. 1 flies into the Pentagon. The 4th is believed to be headed for the U.S. Capitol building or the White House in Washington. But it crashes in a field in rural Pennsylvania after a battle with heroic passengers trying to retake control from the terrorists.
Osama bin Laden was inspired by what he saw Khomeini accomplishing. Bin Laden is a Sunni Muslim. Khomeini was a Shia Muslim. It didn't really matter. Yes, it mattered on theological differences, but their commitment to jihad, their commitment to ending Western civilization, their commitment to raising up new radicals wherever they could find it was solid and united them in a sense.
Osama bin Laden is a huge danger. He is now an icon, of course. He has a vision.
The vision? Bring death and destruction to the United States and her allies in pursuit of building a global Islamic empire. KSM was a deputy to Osama bin Laden and the chief strategist of the 9/11 attacks. The arrest in 2003 of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, aka KSM, is another dramatic success in the global war against radical Islam.
He has confessed to dozens of plots that he was developing and authorizing his disciples, his jihadist disciples, to carry out. And the list is chilling. It covers things from hijacking planes to run them into the Sears Tower in Chicago, to assassinating world leaders, the Pope, former President Bush, former President Clinton. The list goes on and on and on. Those attacks were thwarted, in part by the arrest of KSM, and in part by the arrest and killing of many of his disciples and operatives. But time and time again, we have seen that radicals are planning new, catastrophic, at times even cataclysmic attacks.
More than 20 terror plots against the U.S. have been thwarted since 2001. May 2002, Jose Padilla, an American citizen, is arrested for trying to obtain a radioactive dirty bomb to use in an attack inside the U.S. September 2002, 6 Americans arrested near Buffalo, New York, accused of running an al-Qaeda sleeper cell. August 2005, 5 men arrested in California, accused of plotting to blow up Los Angeles International Airport, 2 synagogues, and the Israeli consulate. May 2007, 6 men arrested in New Jersey, accused of plotting to attack the U.S. Army base at Fort Dix. But not all success stories make headlines. During the Bush administration, Fred Schween was a senior advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security.
One guy we stopped coming in the border because Customs Border Protection didn't feel that he was legitimate in his interests in the United States. We denied his entry into the country, and he was sent home. And 2 years later, he was found to have been a suicide bomber. His hands were found attached to a steering wheel of a suicide truck bomber in Iraq.
From 2003 to 2008, U.S. and coalition forces killed nearly 20,000 terrorists and captured more than 25,000 others in Iraq alone. This has helped prevent untold attacks inside the U.S., but the threat has certainly not been neutralized.
This has become a weapon of choice by people who are able to use human ordnance. Think of that, human ordnance. They're spending human lives to go out and blow up other people. This is innocent people. This is not even slightly reminiscent of something like the kamikaze warrior fighters for Japan, for the Imperial Air Force and Navy, in an organized military fashion as sort of a last military resort against military targets. This is people who are going out and believe that there's a better deal somewhere else or whatever motivates them, and will take innocent lives in a brutal way to do that. That is something that a civilized world is not ready to deal with right now.
How many radical Muslims are there in the world today? Between 2001 and 2007, the Gallup organization conducts a massive survey of Islamic attitudes all throughout the Islamic world. By their analysis, 93% of Muslims worldwide are reasonably moderate. They may not love the United States, but they don't have any intention of teaching their children to strap bombs around themselves. This is the good news. The bad news, 7% of Muslims worldwide would in fact be defined as radicals.
They believe in suicide bombing, they hate the West, and they want game-changing Islamic operations to ensue. On the one hand, that we should be encouraged to say, yeah, most Muslims that you're going to meet aren't trying to kill you. And that's an important point to make. But 7% is a significant number. When you look at about 1.3 billion Muslims worldwide, 7% is 91 million people. If these 91 million radicals were to create their own country, the Islamic Republic of Radicalistan, for example, they'd be the 12th largest country in the world by population. And the question then is, does that make you feel better?
Intelligence indicates Osama bin Laden and his al-Qaeda movement have long been actively trying to acquire weapons of mass destruction. Their goal? Not simply to terrorize Western cities, but to annihilate them. We call on the Muslim nation to prepare for jihad imposed by Allah and terrorize the enemy by preparing the force necessary. This should include a nuclear force. Osama bin Laden, May 14, 1998.
It is their goal to control the United States. Why? Because if they can control the United States and influence the government, the Senate, the president, if they can accomplish that, then the rest of the world will be like a domino.
Stakes are very high. And when you're thinking of a major terrorist attack in the United States, you have to remember that we have to get it right 100% of the time. They only have to get it right from their perspective once.
One of the most serious threats, that radicals will seize control of Pakistan, a hotbed of Islamic radicalism, and gain control of a government that currently possesses an estimated 150 nuclear warheads.
The reason that several of us were in Pakistan was a concern about, has this created a new doomsday scenario? That's what got us energized again and involved looking at the situation. Well, now the doomsday scenario has switched to, whoa, wait a minute, if these folks could do it, who else could get this kind of material among the radical Islam fundamentalists and do what with it? Are we watching closely enough in other areas to stop this? And the answer I can give you right now is I know there is cheating going on, and I know there is proliferation going on, and there are some willing players. Some of them have been described as members of the axis of evil. They are out and about. They make money doing this. They don't care about the consequences. They're not necessarily political consequences to them. It's economic at the moment. So I feel that this is now the new doomsday scenario if one of these nuclear weapons or this capability falls in the hands of irresponsible people who have declared that they want to wipe out our Western form of civilization because it is apostate.
Chilling as it is, nuclear weapons in the hands of al-Qaeda operatives is not the only concern. Annihilating Western cities, and particularly U.S. and Israeli cities, is a stated goal that the current leaders of Iran share with al-Qaeda. January 2001, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says it is the mission of the Islamic Republic of Iran to erase Israel from the map of the region. October 26, 2005, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says Israel must be wiped off the map. We shall soon experience a world without the United States and Zionism. April 14, 2006, Ahmadinejad says, like it or not, the Zionist regime is headed for annihilation. June 2nd, 2008, Ahmadinejad says, today the time for the fall of the satanic power of the United States has come, and the countdown to the annihilation of the Emperor of Power and Wealth has started. June 4th, 2008, Ahmadinejad added, get ready for a world minus the U.S. Some in Washington downplay the threat, believing such talk is mere rhetoric, not a plan of action. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu believes the threat is very real.
Islam had declined, and the correction is supposed to be done by the resurrection of an Islamic empire and the acquisition of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear weapons, if necessary, to obliterate Islam's enemies and to subjugate the rest. You've already seen what the Sunni stream does, which is to smash into buildings in Manhattan with collective suicide, to smash into the Pentagon with collective suicide, and there's no reason to believe that the militant Shiites, once they have atomic weapons, will not be suicidal.
There's no question in my mind that Ahmadinejad is, and people in the military in Iran are seeking the Persian bomb for military purposes, not just about peaceful nuclear power. Suddenly, we're talking about a nuclear weapon in the hands of a radical in the caliphate.
The radical Islamic revolutionaries that are following Khomeini's teachings now are seeking access to chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. And should they acquire these type of weapons, we could see catastrophic attacks in the United States and around the world that would make 9/11 pale by comparison.
If this were not sobering enough, there is another factor that makes the current crisis exponentially more dangerous.
Ahmadinejad comes out of a cult in the Shiite Islamic world, which was actually illegal during Khomeini's time. And this cult believes in the impending return of the 12th or hidden imam, a kind of messianic savior for the Shiites who is supposed to come to power in the aftermath of tremendous wars and an Armageddon-like scenario.
Never before in the nuclear age have the leaders of a revolutionary country held the belief that the end of the world was at hand, and that they were chosen to bring it about. But this is now the case in Iran. Ahmadinejad campaigned for president in 2005, vowing to prepare the way for the Islamic Messiah. When he took office, he said the end of the world was just 2 or 3 years away.
The danger of Ahmadinejad is that he believes that this apocalyptic scenario can be accelerated by men, and he believes that the destruction of Israel is part of the key first steps that will lead to Islamic rule over the whole world.
The Bright Future Institute is a religious think tank located in the city of Qom, Iran. Established in 2004, its scholars issue papers on the distinct signs that will precede the coming of this Islamic Messiah, known as the Mahdi. Chief among them, apocalyptic wars in Iraq and in the Holy Land. The signs include a massive earthquake and the launching of a global war to kill or subjugate Jews, Christians, and other infidels.
The regime in Iran has been saying for the last few years that the way to hasten the coming of the Islamic Messiah, known as the Mahdi or the 12th Imam, is to annihilate 2 countries, Israel, whom they describe as the little Satan, and the United States, whom they describe as the great Satan. They believe that Allah has chosen them for an apocalyptic genocidal moment. They believe if they die, they're going to be in the arms of 72 virgins. And what's more, they believe they've been chosen to fundamentally change human civilization, to kill infidels, Jews, Christians, and Muslims who don't believe as they believe. And my question is, how do you deter or contain or successfully negotiate with radical Islamic leaders who have such genocidal beliefs? What carrot can you offer a leader like that who believes it's his mission to usher in the coming of the Islamic Messiah by killing tens of millions of people?
The Mahdi will first appear in Mecca, then in Medina. He will conquer all of Arabia, Syria, and Iraq, destroy Israel, and then set up a global government in Iraq. Jesus, these scholars say, will come back to earth, but not as the Son of God or even as a leader. Rather, Jesus will serve as a deputy to the Mahdi to destroy the infidels.
This is the nightmare scenario, that the most radical Islamic extremist regime that is already the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, that is now fully entrenched in the most violent way in Iraq, killing thousands of innocent people, that has called for wiping Israel off the map, that an end to the United States, that has this global Islamic rule agenda and believes in the end of the world, would now get the nuclear bomb.
Such end times theology is not shared by most Sunni Muslims. Indeed, many Shia Muslims don't believe this, nor do most Iranians. But the current leaders of Iran do. Such eschatology is driving Iranian foreign policy. It is why Iran is building nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. It is why Iran is building alliances with 3 nuclear powers, Russia, China, and North Korea. It is why Iran is resisting full negotiations with the West, because Iran's leaders believe having nuclear weapons is the only way they will be able to annihilate the U.S. and Israel and create the conditions of chaos, carnage, and genocide necessary to trigger the coming of the Islamic Messiah.
They want to concentrate on completing their nuclear program, because once they have that, then they could threaten the West in ways that are unimaginable. They threaten to create a second Holocaust in Israel and proceed on their idea of a global empire, producing 25 atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade, with missiles that they're already working on. They want to develop to reach the eastern seaboard of the United States. To have such a regime that believes in an apocalyptic Armageddon with the West, in which millions will die on both sides, but the Muslim millions go to a Muslim heaven with all the trappings. To have that crazy ideology in charge of a country that is developing atomic weapons is unbelievably dangerous, and it should stop. Everything else is secondary to this.
Will the government in Jerusalem launch a preemptive military strike to neutralize the Iranian threat? This interview was filmed in 2007, before Mr. Netanyahu was re-elected prime minister. But his answers are both instructive and sobering.
It's very hard to rely on deterrence. It is not the same as Soviet Russia. It is not the same as China or India or any one of the nuclear powers today, that you're fairly comfortable understanding that they think in terms of cost and benefit. In the case of a religious, extreme religious cult that has no such calculations, you could in fact face a suicidal regime. And therefore you can't rely on deterrence. You should work on prevention. That is, preventing them from acquiring the weapons of mass death.
How much time does the West have to make a decision to act decisively to stop Iran?
Not much. We're running out of time. I can't tell you if it's a period of months or a few years. It's certainly no more than a few years. It has to be stopped now.
Few in Washington or Western capitals understand the end times theology held by the Iranian leadership, and thus far, little decisive or effective action has been taken by the U.S. or her allies to stop the mullahs in Iran. This is why attention is increasingly focused on Israel.
Of all the things that are difficult for statesmen and political leaders, preemption is the hardest, because you can never prove what would happen if you don't preempt. So it had the West preempted against Germany in the 1930s, there would have been a lot of controversy and a lot of argument against excessive violence. But of course, millions, tens of millions of people, let alone the 6 million Jews, would have been saved. And it's the same thing today. To take strong action against Iran, first in the form of sanctions, and second, if those don't work, using other means, is something that would be criticized, perhaps severely criticized. By the way, less so in the Arab and Muslim world. They just want it to happen. They're begging it to happen. But in the sort of polite, politically correct opinion salons that never get it right, in the West, you'd be criticized, but you'd be saving the world and probably saving millions and millions of lives.
God does not forbid you, as regards those who do not make war against you on account of your religion, to be kindly to them, Jews and Christians, and act towards them with equity. God surely loves the scrupulously equitable. Surah 68. While the radicals dominate global headlines with violence and extremist rhetoric, they are not the only movement in the Islamic world, nor are they the largest. The vast majority of the world's 1.3 billion plus Muslims are peaceful, moderate people. This represents what Rosenberg calls the rank and file. They may or may not love the West, but they do not support suicide bombings or nuclear genocide. They want good jobs, good schools, and freedom to worship as they choose.
The reformers are those Muslims who say, yes, yes, Islam is the answer, but jihad is not the way. We need more openness. We need to expand and protect human rights, civil rights. We need even representational democracy up to the point of a full-blown Jeffersonian ideal.
Not all reformers publicly describe themselves as followers of Thomas Jefferson, but many are in fact pursuing Jeffersonian democracy. They agree with Jefferson that all people are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They agree with Jefferson that people should be free to choose their own leaders and determine their own laws. They also believe, like Jefferson, that these are God-given rights, and that governments are created to protect them, not dispense them or deny them at will.
Turkey was the first country to say, we are Muslims, but we are not radicals. We want to encourage free speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. We want to build close relationships with the West. This is an extraordinary change, particularly given the fact that it was the seat of the Caliphate, the Islamic Empire, the Ottoman Empire, for centuries. Turkey decided not only to be friendly to the West, Turkey is a NATO ally. The United States actually positioned nuclear missiles on Turkish soil, controlled by US forces, but nevertheless on Turkish soil, aimed at the Soviet Union during the coldest years of the Cold War. This is how much Turkey had changed from an enemy of the West to an ally. And of course, as I sit here in Istanbul, this is the city that literally bridges the gap between East and West.
A growing number of other Muslim-majority countries are moving in the reformers' direction, among them Afghanistan. Jordan, one of the most intriguing, is Morocco. It remains a kingdom rather than a pure democracy, but in recent years, Morocco has, at the king's direction and approval, established a functioning elected parliamentary system that passes and administers most laws. Dr. Ahmed Abadi once served as the Moroccan government's Director of Islamic Affairs. There, he oversaw some 33,000 mosques. Today, he runs a strategic studies center in the capital of Rabat, dedicated to understanding the radicals and developing what he calls the Moroccan model of reform.
When you study the extremist literature and you visit their websites and their DVDs and what they produce, you would see that there are repetitive items that come back all the time. The first one is colonialism. The West is civilized because he came in and colonized our countries and killed our people. The second repetitive item is the issue of draining the wealth of the Islamic world. The third point is this Hollywood stigmata and humiliation that is going on in the movies and that are showing Arabs and Muslims being stupid, being dirty, and so on.
At the direction of Morocco's King Mohammed VI, a team of Islamic scholars and security officials have set out to ensure that their brand of reform is not hijacked or subverted by the radicals. The stakes are high, and the reformers know they are in a race against time.
We've had our own 9/11 here in Morocco. We've had several bombings that happened in Casablanca, May 16th, 2003. And we have serial trials of bombing later on.
May 16th, 2003 was a terrible day for me as a journalist and for me as a Moroccan first. I could never imagine that people, Moroccans, would kill Moroccans or even non-Moroccans the way they did. I could not imagine that young Moroccans could 16 of them, just go all over Casablanca and explode themselves.
Morocco, fortunately, was not a mute Satan towards this. We marched on the streets, 1 million march. People were there protesting against this and defending the soul of Islam. Jews and Muslims were marching together and protesting against this and saying, this is not the Islam we believe in. This is not our Islam.
In France, there's a slogan that says, don't touch my friend, for discrimination, racism, and they created something similar saying, don't touch my country. And they had these stickers that you can still see until today. And there were Christians, Jews, and Muslims marching together, basically saying we are against this type of terrorism.
Reformers say they are sickened by the violence perpetrated by the radicals. What's more, they say that the reform movement is growing precisely because Muslims are watching the radicals in action and want a different path. Fahida Layadi was a newscaster in Morocco on 9/11. Now she is one of a small but growing number of women elected to the Moroccan parliament and committed to promoting a peaceful brand of Islam at home and abroad.
Terrorism is something crazy. Terrorism is something, I don't know how to say it in English. Islam comes from peace. So what are we speaking about? Osama bin Laden is not a Muslim for me. They are creatures of chaos. This is what they are for me. I just cannot understand where they are coming from and where they want us to go. We have nothing in common as Muslims.
One can discernate a lot of apocalyptic seeds in our thinking. And the world, by internalizing those seeds, threatens to destroy itself. And we need to stop that.
Morocco has played a critical role post 9/11 in hunting down al-Qaeda terrorists. It retains its Islamic culture and heritage, but the leaders of Morocco have made a decision. We are not going to be radical Muslims. We are reformer Muslims, and we're going to find our way to build bridges both with the rest of the Muslim world, but also with Judeo-Christian civilization.
This is a true battle about defining the soul and spirits of Islam itself.
After these May 2003 bombings, there were several reforms that were set in place to start schools to train imams. Previously they were trained outside the country, but now train them inside the country. Their desire is to train religious leaders, I believe, that could lead them forward into the future and not be stuck in the past.
We need to act. And here in Morocco, His Majesty's strategies offers this possibility to create a prompt and an accurate answer to what is happening in our world. The worst case scenario, if the reformers do not act promptly, is that we would miss the opportunity to live a beautiful life together. We would miss the opportunity to bridge between our nations and to perform the mutual recognition that is mandatory in Islam itself.
Are you Jewish? Are you Muslim? Or are you Christian? I don't care about it. I hope that one day I will see an Iraqi, Saudi, or an Iranian looking the same way.
While Turkey and Morocco have been leaders in the reformer movement, it is actually Iraq that has emerged in recent years as the epicenter of the battle between radicals and reformers.
Iraq was widely perceived as the central battleground between radicals and reformers. Certainly Afghanistan was a major battleground, but the central battleground has been Iraq.
Dr. Ali Aldaba is a Shia Muslim and the chief spokesman for Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. He remembers vividly the elections in January 2005.
They came like singing to the ballot to put their votes there. It was like a festival for us in Iraq. And it is a symbolic day, even though there was a high threat for them. But they came singing and dancing, and they just put their finger in that thing. They will choose the government.
Aldaba is an avowed follower of Thomas Jefferson.
I remember Jefferson when we had drafting the Constitution. I was in the drafting committee, and I know how important Jefferson for the United States. I remember that we are doing a job which the history will remember us, because we are placing principles of equality among the people. Iraq is no more threatening the neighbors. Iraq is a stabilizing country in the region. Iraq will promote that value of a democracy and peace in the region. My dream that Iraq will give equal opportunities for its citizens as the America they give for Mr. Obama, that everyone could get that opportunity, could be part of the process.
A central figure in Iraq emerging as the first true Arab democracy in world history is Nouri al-Maliki, a Shia Muslim who has put his entire political career on the line to defeat the radicals and expand democracy in his homeland.
Prime Minister Maliki is the first elected 4 years Prime Minister. I think he is doing a very good job in Iraq, and he is promoting the peace. And this is the democracy which gives the chances for a good man like a Maliki to come on and take over and then rule the people in a democratic way.
Another central figure in the reformer movement in the region has been Iraqi President Jalal Talabani. Once a guerrilla leader in the northern Kurdish region of Iraq, Talabani actually helped build an impressive functioning democratic government in Kurdistan in the 1990s, after U.S. and coalition forces gave the oppressed Kurdish people safe haven from Saddam Hussein.
He's the first democratically, constitutionally elected president of Iraq in the history of the country in over 5,000 years. But when you dig deeper into Talabani's life, what you find is this was a guerrilla leader who was fighting against Saddam Hussein's regime, who was building teams of guerrilla fighters and leading his people into battle as insurgents against Saddam Hussein's regime.
President Talabani, we call him in Iraq and describe him as Uncle Jalal. I think he is a man of equilibrium. He is a balancing power. We do need him whenever there is any tension among the groups of the political parties. And I think he's playing that constructive role in Iraq.
He has emerged as a very trusted leader inside one of the most difficult, challenging countries in the whole region, in the whole world.
Mala Bakhtar is a spokesman for the Iraqi president.
Nations during big crises need great leaders, and great leaders emerge from big crises or complicated problems.
Amidst such raging violence perpetrated and encouraged by the radicals, the stakes have been incredibly high for the reformers.
Part of American public opinion and European countries mistakenly thinking that Iraq is facing these problems because of the existence of American forces in Iraq. On the contrary, 80% of those problems have been controlled due to the existence of Americans and British. In reality, the existence of American and British soldiers is not the problem.
شيعة حيدر المهيو غصبا علي ضد باطي كل تكره الإسلام ما تمنعنا عن حسين.
Terrorist groups planned and worked hard to create a civil war in Iraq, and in this they were supported by some neighboring states. If a civil war would have started, at least between 500,000 to 1 million people would have been killed.
Nechervan Barzani is the Prime Minister of Iraqi Kurdistan.
We are in the middle of this tension or struggle between the extremism and reformism.
Barzani is committed to defeating the radicals. His security forces have crushed terrorist cells. He has encouraged the teaching of moderate Islam. He even shut down a Saudi-backed school in the Iraqi city of Dohuk that was, in his view, teaching radicalism.
For one of the first steps that we did was to close down that college, not because we are against religion. No, we are not against the sacred or the holy Islam religion or any other religion. We are against extremism in whatever form it is. We are against extremism, we are against violence, and we, all the people of this region who live here, we want to live in peace. That was the reason that we have taken that step in order not to allow for extremism and violence to emerge in this region.
Under the Prime Minister's leadership, Christians have become free to worship openly, build churches, print Bibles and other Christian literature without the threat of government persecution.
They have deep historical roots in Iraq as a state and also in Kurdistan region. They have deep historical roots in this country. The significance of that nation doesn't come in their number or size. The important thing is the historical roots that they have. People have to be free to practice their own belief and faith.
In pursuit of his reformer agenda, Barzani has suggested publicly that he would prefer a Muslim become a follower of another religion than become a radical and a follower of jihad.
The question came, if we were to give freedom for people to follow religion and follow extremism, then it may be better for us to allow people to choose another religion which will not lead them to violence, which will not lead them to extremism.
This is the new Iraq, and while the battle is not over, these Iraqis have made tremendous and impressive progress against all odds.
When I traveled to Iraq in 2008, the situation was really changing quite rapidly. Violence was down more than 80% in the country at that point. Iraqi officials told me that 90% of Iraqi territory was now relatively safe. 70% of combat operations in Iraq against radicals were being led by Iraqi forces. When the United States, under President Bush, decided to put more troops in, it sent a message throughout Iraqi society: the West is here to stay until we get this thing right. They are not going to abandon us. They will not cut and run on us. There is time for us to fight against the radicals and get it right. And it didn't go well at first. It took some time. But by late 2008, U.S. forces were beginning to be drawn down. Iraqis were signing agreements with the United States to bring U.S. forces down over the next few years. And By my second trip to Iraq, people were really extraordinarily excited inside Iraq about how much progress had been made. Top advisors to the president of Iraq were actually talking about how optimistic they were that Iraq could become a model of democratic reform, Jeffersonian reform in the Muslim world.
I ask all the Christians, all the Christian NGOs that are providing humanitarian assistance, I ask them to come to this country to provide help and assistance to this new democracy process in this country. I ask them to come here, to cooperate with us, to support us. Let's get together, let's work together in order to understand each other better than now and support this current democratic process in Iraq in order to achieve success.
A third group of revolutionaries is operating throughout the Muslim world today. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And also on my manservants and on my maidservants I will pour out my spirit in those days. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Joel chapter 2, verses 28, 29, and 32. They receive little attention in the media, but their movement is actually large and growing rapidly. But unlike the radicals, they renounce violence. Unlike the reformers, they have little interest in political change. Theirs is a spiritual revolution.
Samuel Adams' father and my father formed a little bit of partnership at the age of 17 after the '67 war. I decided to run away from home and go and join Yasser Arafat and his forces.
I am a Palestinian, an orphan boy who lived his childhood in the city of Jerusalem.
My Arab trainer said, "You are a butcher." Because when I get to my victim, whatever they prepare for me as a victim to kill, I go for it with everything I got.
In my teens, I discovered for the first time that there's a book that I'd never read. And I wondered at age 16, how on earth was I not given that copy before?
My friend, who befriended me for 19 years, it came to the point for him to tell me about his faith. I didn't know what his faith was.
My curiosity overpowered me, and I read it. And it was the big eye-opener.
He said, "What do you know about Jesus?" I said, "We believe Jesus. We believe in him. He's a prophet." He said, "Well, he's more than a prophet." I said, "What?" He said, "He's the Son of God. He is God." And I jumped off that sofa. I said, "Now that is a blasphemy. We don't believe in this. I'm getting out of here."
For the first time, I discovered I was a sinner. Up until then, I didn't see myself as a sinner.
He went and brought his Bible. And he put his Bible between the two of us. And when he did that, I physically jumped away from it. He said, "Why did you jump like that?" I said, "I cannot touch that." He said, "Why? It's just a piece of paper." I said, No, it's got the name of God and the Word of God in it.
But God's Spirit was moving, obviously, and I came face to face for the first time at age 17, 18 with my sinfulness. I went down on my knees and I wept and asked Christ into my life.
He opens the Bible and he begins to read to me. And he read from one of the books in the Bible called the Book of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God in the beginning. That's as far as I heard him reading. I started shaking, I lost conscience, and the next I know, I'm on the floor, on my knees, with my hands lifted up, inviting Jesus to be my Lord and Savior.
The big untold story in the Middle East right now is the dramatic and widespread conversions of Muslims to Christianity.
Bob Coy is the pastor of one of the largest evangelical congregations in America. He is also part of a growing movement of Christian leaders who believe it is their responsibility to support the revivalists in the Muslim world.
Our church right now is actively involved in 2 countries. I can't even tell you the name of the countries because it's illegal to do what we do there. That burdens me, but it also blesses me because I get reports back from these men on the mission field telling me that the interest is great.
It's really one of the most dramatic developments in the Middle East in recent decades, and yet it's very seldom reported in the Western media, even among evangelical Christians. Very few people realize just how many millions of Muslims, both Sunnis and Shias, are becoming followers of Jesus Christ. And these are leaders in the region. Some are Arabs, some are Iranians, some are Turks, people who say Islam is not the answer. Jihad is not the way. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. And these revivalists believe that the only way for the people of the region to move forward socially, educationally, economically, developmentally, spiritually, is to skip back in their history before Islam and to revive first century, New Testament, biblical Christianity.
Muslims living in the West are also increasingly turning to Christ in record numbers. As a result, a growing number of evangelical leaders are urging Christians to love their Muslim neighbors in real and practical ways, to pray for their Muslim neighbors, and not to be afraid to share the gospel with Muslims with gentleness and respect.
We have to be praying for the Muslim world because the Muslim world is now here. Open doors and avenues to talk to the Muslim community. If you're a pastor, find ways to build bridges, not erect walls. Just recently, I had the chance to pray a prayer of repentance and salvation with a 70-year-old Muslim woman. She opened her heart and she said, I know what you're saying is true because I know that in my Islamic faith there is no assurance for salvation. I'd like to know your Jesus.
Hormoz Shariat is one of the leaders of the revivalist movement.
In '79, at the time of revolution, I was in Tehran and I was a student at those days, and I was demonstrating on the streets against Shah and against US. I was the one, when others would say, death to America. We felt, the young generation at that time, that Shah's regime is corrupt. That's why in '79, not just Muslims, those who were not religious, they all united for Islam. In early '80s, I realized, and other people started realizing, this is not the answer. The Islamic Republic of Iran is not bringing what it has promised. And there was corruption rising. There was a war between Iran and Iraq. People started doubting in the '80s, is Islam the way?
Shariat and his wife head to California for graduate school. At this point, their disappointment with the Iranian Revolution is growing, as is their hunger for spiritual answers.
I studied Quran very objectively, as much as I could. And I finished studying Quran, I felt still empty. What is this God? This is a religion, these are rules that I need to do. Where is God? And I felt I should study Bible also. As a researcher, I should study books. And maybe I should read the Bible. I didn't expect to find anything new in it because I believed Quran is the last book and most complete book. The more I studied, I saw the fundamental difference between what Quran teaches and what the Bible teaches. And I couldn't say I believe in both. So I struggled for a few months and eventually came to realize that God loves us and Jesus is salvation to the whole world. Religion doesn't save, but Jesus does save.
In the years following the '79 revolution, millions of other Muslims begin questioning Islam as well.
There's no peace in Islam. And that's why I ask Muslims, do you have peace in your heart? Do you have peace in your relationship with God? Because a Muslim always is worried about his relationship with God. There's no peace. We're afraid of God. Fear has no peace. A Muslim is always afraid of what Allah would do to them. So Islam, even though it says a religion of peace, it cannot and has not brought peace to people's lives personally, to families, to their relationship with others, and with their relationship with God.
Today, Hormoz Shariat is the Billy Graham of Iran. His live primetime satellite television program is watched by several million Iranians every weekday night.
He had sought to broadcast on secular Persian channels But they had denied us, said, no, Iranians are tired of religion, we don't let you. But after September 11, we got a 1 hour a week of broadcast. It had such a response from Muslims that other satellite channels, secular, would started allowing us to have more and more time. We went 24/7 broadcasting to the Middle East and Europe, and suddenly, overnight, the number of responses, the number of salvations tripled. And we are overwhelmed by the response. Many times we have the honor of sharing the gospel on the air and even praying with these Muslims to receive Christ on the air. And that is a miracle.
In 1979, Iranian pastors tell me there were probably about 500 known Shia Muslim converts to Christianity in the entire country. 500. Today, having interviewed more than 40 Iranian Christian ministry leaders, they tell me that there are at least 1 million Shia Muslim converts to Christianity in the country. They expect there to be 10,000 new house churches planted in Iran just over the next 12 to 18 months.
They have made owning a satellite dish illegal, and it is illegal to own a satellite dish in Iran. So, but they cannot stop it. What God has started, they cannot stop it.
There's just a tremendous growth of the church there, despite the fact that the radical Islamic government is doing everything they can to crack down on the church.
The phenomenon is not limited to Iran. In Saudi Arabia, there are now more than 100,000 followers of Jesus Christ. In Pakistan, there are now more than 2.5 million Christians. In Egypt, there are also more than 2.5 million Christians. In Sudan, there are actually now more than 5 million followers of Christ. Radio and satellite television broadcasting is one of the ways the gospel message is being heard in countries whose governments or Islamic authorities fiercely oppose the communication of the Christian message. Rosenberg calls this the air war.
When it comes to the air war, the leading revivalist revolutionary is an Egyptian Coptic priest by the name of Father Zechariah Botros.
It is time for the church to stand up with courage and conviction and say, in the power of the Holy Spirit, Islam is not the answer. Jihad is not the way. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the truth. Jesus is the life. And no man or woman can come to the Father except through faith in Jesus Christ. This is the message of John 14:6. This is the message of the entire New Testament.
He is now being watched by 50 million Muslims a day throughout the Middle East. Now, he's got this 90-minute program where he not only explains Christian truths, but he also deconstructs the person of Muhammad, as well as the teachings of the Quran and some extra Islamic teachings known as the Hadith. And he explains from his perspective why they're wrong and why Jesus is right.
Now is not the time to hide from the Muslim world. Now is the time to take the gospel of Jesus Christ to every man, woman, and child on the planet, to every Jew and every Gentile, and proclaim him as the hope of mankind, the only hope for the troubled world. I have been doing this for most of my life, sharing the good news for salvation through Jesus Christ with the people of the Middle East. For this, I was exiled from my home country of Egypt. For this, I have been named Islam's public enemy #1. For this, there is now a price on my head. But I love Jesus more than my life. And because Jesus loves Muslims, because he came and laid down his life to save them, I love them too. And I am willing to lay my life down, if necessary, to reach them for my beloved Jesus.
Nobody else talks like this in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Egypt, in Morocco. So people tune in because they can't believe what he's going to say next. But the radicals tune in and they are absolutely infuriated. And once a week, Father Zechariah takes live call-ins, and he'll get people, Muslim clerics, calling in and screaming at him, telling him why he's an evil man and why he's wrong. But he challenges them point by point, verse by verse, from the Quran as well as from the Bible.
The God of the Bible is moving powerfully in the Muslim world today. He is drawing Muslims out of Islam, of faith to faith in Jesus Christ in record numbers. Yes, there is much bad news in the Muslim world today, but there is also much more good news for Muslims. More Muslims have come to faith in Jesus Christ in the last 3 decades than in the last 14 centuries of Islam put together. This is the greatness of our great God.
Father Zechariah's ministry is seeing so many Muslims calling and emailing and writing into their ministry, saying they become followers of Christ, that Al-Qaeda has actually put Father Zechariah's photo on one of their websites as one of the most wanted men in the world. And at this point, we believe that there is now a $60 million bounty on Father Zechariah's head from those radical Islamic jihadists. Now, just to put that into perspective, the United States has put a $25 million bounty on the head of Osama bin Laden. So you can see how much the radicals want this guy silenced, and yet he has become the phenomenon in satellite television throughout the Muslim world.
While radio and satellite TV is effective, revivalists say millions of Muslims are actually becoming followers of Jesus Christ after having dreams and visions of Jesus Christ himself. During a research trip to Iraq, Rosenberg interviewed an Iraqi businessman named Daniel, who'd been raised a Muslim but had become a follower of Jesus Christ after seeing a series of visions.
In 1985, one night I was sleeping on my right side, and then he saw a man with white hair. 3 times he repeated the same sentence in classical Arabic. Stand up, Daniel, go to Jesus Christ. I could not continue sleeping. I stayed awake till morning, and I was thinking all the time, what was this vision? I asked one of my friends, telling him that I saw this vision twice. This person answered him, Hallelujah. It seems that you are a blessed, chosen person.
Daniel's friend takes him to a church. There, Daniel receives a copy of the New Testament. The pastor explains to him that Jesus Christ loves him. Daniel was convinced. He went home and prayed to receive Jesus Christ into his heart.
I continued twice a week to go to this church, and I felt that I was growing spiritually, so they were very happy with me and they baptized me.
During the violent insurgency underway throughout Iraq, Daniel has been living in a hotel in Baghdad for several months on business until something horrible happens.
2 of these people, they were behind me. Both of them, they pulled pistols. One of them put it in my back and kidney, and the other one on my neck. Any movement you do or any word you will utter, we will kill you here and leave you.
Daniel has just been kidnapped by members from the Mahdi army, a radical Shia Muslim terrorist group determined to create chaos in Iraq until the Islamic Messiah known as the Mahdi comes and sets up his kingdom on earth.
They took me to a place in Baghdad called Palestine Street. I told them, how much do you want from me? They said, we want $200,000. I told them I don't have that amount of money, and they started beating me.
Though they continue to torture Daniel, the radicals eventually dropped their demands from $200,000 to $50,000. Eventually, Daniel found a friend who would send $30,000.
They brought a bus And when I was climbing the steps, I felt this is a bus. They drove for about 7 minutes. They opened the door. They asked me to step down. I stepped till my right feet was touching the ground. Somebody pointed his pistol at the left side of my head.
Daniel had just been shot in the left temple by a radical Islamic terrorist. An extraordinary moment, but this was not the end of the story.
I was bleeding all the ways from the wound and from my nose. I started seeing visions. I saw two hands coming towards me. He pulled me up till I was standing face to face, and he placed my head on his chest, telling me, "Daniel, do not be afraid. I will not forsake you. I will not leave you. I am Jesus Christ."
A stranger, a doctor as it turned out, rushes Daniel to an emergency room at the nearby hospital, where a team of trauma specialists attends to him for several hours. Daniel gives all the credit for both his resurrection and his recovery to Jesus Christ. He is not alone. A growing number of Muslims who have left Islam and become followers of Jesus say Christ has healed them both spiritually and physically.
In one of our broadcasts, I said, those who have had supernatural experience with Jesus and he has healed you, call, because he wants to heal your soul and save you. And for 2 hours, our switchboard was lit by people who had experience with Jesus and prayed to receive Christ.
For Tas Sada, it was his hatred of Jews and Israelis that Jesus Christ healed in a miraculous way.
I was a terrorist, but when I was touched with the love of Jesus, suddenly my enemy, the Jew, the Israeli or Israel, is no longer an enemy. On the contrary, the minute I gave my heart to Jesus, the next morning I found myself praying for the Jews first. I'm praying for them to be returned to the promised land.
Sada believes there will never be true peace between Israel and her neighbors until the Messiah, described in the book of Isaiah as the Prince of Peace, transforms the hearts of others.
After studying and reading the Bible, I realized it's the battle against Israel is not a battle against Jews or against land or for land. It's the battle against God. Because it wasn't America that saved Israel in the '67 war. It was the power of God. Because God wanted, God recreated Israel. God brought back the Jews. Why did I pray the day after I was saved, God bless your people Israel, God bring them back to the promised land, when I didn't believe in that it was the promised land for the Jews? I am so happy, and I praise the Lord every day for more and more souls, Muslim people that turns to Christ for an answer.
These revivalist leaders are absolutely intent on transforming the Muslim world. Now, they believe from the scriptures that Jesus is coming back to Jerusalem, that he will reign from the Temple Mount, that he will be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Despite all the persecution, they're willing to endure that, they tell me, because they know that they're ushering in the return of Jesus Christ to earth and the transformation of the world.
Interest in such end times prophecies among Jews and Christians, as well as among Muslims, has grown steadily in recent years. In part, this is because of a deep and growing fear among people in the Middle East that events are headed towards apocalyptic outcomes.
I'm often asked, what's the difference between followers of Jesus Christ in the Middle East who want to set the stage for the return of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, to the world, to Jerusalem, and people like Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who wants to usher in the coming of his Messiah, known as the Mahdi. Well, conceptually, those two things are the same, but there's a very important difference. Ahmadinejad believes that the way to hasten the coming of the Islamic Messiah is to annihilate the United States and Israel, to destroy Judeo-Christian civilization as we know it. In other words, the Ayatollahs in Iran and Ahmadinejad in particular believe deeply that you have to kill tens of millions of people in order to bring about the reign of the Messiah on earth. The revivalists, the followers of Jesus Christ, believe just the opposite. They do believe they're living in the last days, and they do believe they're supposed to live differently in light of that. But they believe that they're supposed to help save tens of millions of people and help lead them into a personal relationship with God through faith in Jesus Christ, and then the end shall come. A 180-degree difference in how to accomplish the revolution. The radicals use extreme violence, and the revivalists believe they need to love their neighbors and love their enemies as Jesus commanded them.
3 decades have passed since the Islamic Revolution exploded onto the world stage in 1979. Today, there are 3 revolutionary movements battling to dominate the Middle East. The radicals say Islam is the answer, and jihad, violence, holy war, is the way. The reformers are Muslims who are pushing back at the radicals. They say yes, Islam is the answer, but jihad is not the way. We need more freedom, more openness. We need to protect human rights, civil rights. Then there are the revivalists. The revivalists say Islam is not the answer, and jihad is not the way. Jesus is the way. What's more, they add, the only way for our part of the world to move forward and make real progress is to skip back in our history before Islam and revive what we once had, 1st century, New Testament, biblical Christianity.
As I've been re-examining my understanding of scriptures over the last number of years, it's become clear to me that God loves the people of the Muslim world. He loves the people of Iran, Iraq, Sudan, Egypt, Pakistan, Afghanistan. He loves the Palestinians. He loves the Jordanians and the Lebanese and the Syrians. Jesus said, love your neighbors. And Jesus said, love your enemies. And I can tell you that the love your enemy strategy, the Christians pretty much have it all to themselves. I don't see radical Muslims trying the love your enemy strategy.
3 movements, each battling to win hearts and minds, all on a collision course. Watching this battle are more than 1.3 billion Muslims. These represent the vast middle ground within Islamic society. When it comes to social, economic, and spiritual crisis plaguing Islam, they're asking who has the right solution. Are the radicals right that Islam needs to be purified through violence if necessary? Are the reformers right that Islam needs to open up and give people more freedom, opportunity, and even democracy? Or are the revivalists right that Jesus Christ is the hope for mankind in this life and in the life to come? The members of this vast middle ground, the silent majority, are going about their day-to-day lives without much of a desire to be revolutionaries of any kind. They don't want to rock the boat, but they are hungry for hope. They are increasingly desperate for answers. They are the audience to which the radicals, the reformers, and the revivalists are speaking. And should one of these 3 movements ever gain the majority or even a working plurality of the vast middle ground, the entire world will be changed forever, for good or ill.